Today in Lessons from an Old Quilt, we're going to take a look at this beauty. This is a really great quilt. I got it in an auction. When I won it, the runner at the auction brought it to me. It stunk so bad that we had to put it on the ground in our bag. It just reeked. Once I got home and hand washed it, I had to wash it 6 times. It was gross, but it is clean now and it is wonderful. The quilt block pattern is a variation on a block called Edna's Choice, and I found that in this book. It's number 101 if you do happen to own this book. I believe this book is out of print, but if you can get your hands on one, definitely do it. It's a great one. This quilt measures 75 by 75 approximately, and I will have a tutorial on this block coming up tomorrow, so make sure you stay tuned for that. So let's take a closer look at this incredible quilt. Okay, let's start by talking about this incredible fabric. This is what drew me to this quilt. When I bought it, I saw it at the auction and I had to have it because this print is adorable. It has horseshoes and shamrocks all over it, and it's throughout this quilt. It's the sashing, it's the center of the blocks, it's the binding, and it's the backing. So it's everywhere. And I think what makes this fabric really work is that it is a non-directional fabric, meaning that everything's kind of scattered about, and it allowed for the maker to piece pieces of this quilt. So you can see that in the sashing here, this is pieced together to make the full sashing strip. That just speaks to us as quilters using what we have, or the way it used to be that we would use what we have. I don't know if it happens as much anymore, but maybe we need to bring that back. So we see this block and it is made up of a center square and then these little squares around it. Let me get some paper so we can take a closer look at that. And I know the block is pretty obvious, but I do want to just focus in on it for a minute because there's some interesting things about this block. So the block itself measures about 9 1/4, 9 1/2 inches, and it is a center block, which again is the same fabric as the sashing, backing, and binding. And then it has 12 little squares around it. Within these squares are many different fabrics. It's very scrappy, although we do see fabrics repeated throughout. But what's really brave or interesting, or I don't even know the word to use, is that the maker added red fabrics that appear to be the same value as the center and background fabric. Now, these could have faded. We know that this red faded, which I'll show you in a minute. But still, I would think they faded together at the same rate, maybe not. I think that's interesting because it adds to this dynamic. And I didn't notice it until I started to really dive in and look at this quilt, is that we see a lot of blues. In fact, each of these blocks has at least one blue in it. When you look at the quilt as a whole, you can see that that blue really pops. So once you see it, right? Speaking of the fabrics, if we look at this one here, we can see that the same pattern colorway in blue is also in this quilt. I love that. So we see them both together here. And again, you see some blues sprinkled in, not always in the same spot, in the border of this block. This block is completely hand pieced, but the sashing strips are added by machine. There's a lot of theories on what that could mean. Could be that the maker got a machine later, finished the quilt later, wanted some handwork, and then went to the machine. Could have been finished by somebody else years later. Who knows, but so much fun to think about. This quilt is completely machine quilted. There's the crosshatch design, and then in the smaller squares, the maker put them a little closer together, starting and stopping. Within the sashing, we see this wonderful serpentine design machine quilted into it. Each of the blocks are also machine quilted around the outside. Let's take a peek at the backing of this quilt. I'm going to flip it over. Now, first of all, I just want to show you how much this fabric has faded. I believe this was let out in the sun a little bit too long, or maybe just used, or whatever. The dye wasn't that great, who knows? But you can see the difference between the front and the back. Kind of sad, but you know what? That happens, right? So let's flip it over and take a peek at the back. Okay, you can really see the quilting on the back, and we do see that this is pieced down the middle, and this happens to be, which is so funny, pieced by hand. So the backing was pieced by hand, adding to this mystery of this quilt. So incredible, so interesting, just tell me what you think of the comments happened here, because what? Who does that? And it's not like the maker was trying to line up a pattern or anything. I don't know what happened there. All right, so the binding is separate, but it's still the same fabric. So it was separate and added on, but there is one spot on the binding where there was a repair, or at least I think there was. Let me see if I can find it. You can see there's some wear on the binding here. You can also see the inside is a blanket, an old blanket or flannel sheet or something like that. So the batting inside is just sheeting or just other material. All right, of course it's going to be on the last side. I look. Okay, so here, hopefully you can see that, we see the binding was repaired, and it was repaired with fabric that wasn't faded. So who knows when this happened, but it definitely was added later. You can see the difference. Hopefully you can see the difference right there where it was added. And it was added really well. Another clue that it was added later is when the maker turned it over to stitch it on by hand, the maker used white thread, whereas in the rest of the maker used red thread. So it definitely was repaired. Flipping this back over, we do see that some pieces are pieced together. Here we see where 3 all together. See if I can get that into view. 3 pieces were pieced together. Love that. There's a few other places that the maker did this. So here's one, and here's one. So again, the maker used what the maker had to make this incredible, incredible quilt. Make sure to tell me below any lessons that I might have missed, because there are so many lessons we can learn from this quilt. And I always like to pick 3. I'm going to keep doing that this year in 2023. So the first lesson that we can learn from this quilt is about that background fabric. So the maker picked this incredible fabric, maybe by choice or maybe because they had an overabundance of it, because there is a lot of this fabric in it. The maker chose to use this fabric in the centers, on the sashing, in the backing, on the binding, everywhere. And it works. It almost looks like those squares float on this background. So you might want to think about trying something like that in your own work. Again, did the maker actually go out and shop and pick? You know, as modern makers, we would do that, but it might have been what was available. I recognize that. Next, don't be afraid to piece the sashing. This is the first quilt I've seen where somebody's done that, which is really remarkable because I've looked at a lot of quilts and I never thought of it before. We see where blocks are pieced, and you can see that even in this quilt, but I've never really seen where sashing was pieced, and why not? That's a great way to extend the life of your fabric stash, right? So consider piecing some of your sashing strips too. And finally, another lesson, which is another unique lesson, I believe. I don't think I've ever covered this one before, but I think it's important. If you're going to repair a quilt that you made, say 20 years ago, maybe give a clue that it was repaired like this maker did. I don't know if the maker did it on purpose or not, but what a cool way for future generations to look back and say, huh, I wonder if this was repaired and what happened. And it's almost a present to the future that you can give. Just make them wonder, give them something to think about. I hope you enjoyed seeing this quilt as much as I enjoyed sharing it. I will give a tutorial on this block tomorrow. And if you found value in this content, please give me that thumbs up. It really helps me out. I hope you have a great day. I hope you take some time to sew, and I'll see you real soon. Bye.